The first thing to talk about with the evaluation of criteria is the idea of the evaluation patches. And in order to create evaluation patches, under the model menu, there's an option for evaluation patches and auto-generate. And this is typically how you're going to make them. If you haven't already generated the evaluation patches, when you start to run the analysis with any of the criteria selected, Maestro will tell you they haven't been defined yet. Do you want to define them? Or if they have been defined, it'll ask you if you want to redefine them. If you know everything's current, you can skip it, but I usually wind up just saying go ahead and redefine them because it's a very quick process. So if we auto-generate, you have options of doing the entire model or just the current view part. And there are two options for how it's going to create the patches. The first and most common is to use level 0. And with level 0, it's going to use all of the stiffeners, frames, and girders as the supports for the plate. So that'll define the boundaries for your evaluation patches. The other option is a level 1. And level 1, I think by default, is going to use the frames and girders. So you will have larger evaluation patches, but it does allow you to specifically select which beams you want Maestro to use for your plate boundaries. And like in our model right here, you can see it's pre-selected the two frame and girder types that were in our model. But if we wanted to, we could select one of these stiffeners or the other to add to that list, or neither. Or we could delete the frames and then only girders would be used as boundaries for our evaluation patches. And this would also be one way where you could create those larger patches like you had mentioned earlier about for running Maestro Wave. If we had too many patches on the hull, there is a mechanism already in there where you can expand those patches, where we just sort of increase the aspect ratio of the patches and they started combining to get the total number of patches on the hull reduced. But another way of doing it might be to run level 1 to get larger patches. But typically we'll be running level 0 and it'll search the entire model. Now here it says we have them previously defined. If you'd like to delete them and recreate, I usually say yes. As you can see, it doesn't take very long and it's done. And if we want to see where they are, come under view and do evaluation patch and we can see the display. Well, we have one stiffener between each element, or one element between each stiffener rather. So our patches are only one element wide and we have frames on every other element. So they're only 2 long. Although on the bulkheads, you can see we have much taller patches. Those are the pieces of plate that are going to be evaluated. And for our beams, you can see how long those patches are. Now, if we use dynamic query to come in and view the patches, now we're currently just querying elements, but there is an option in here to select the patch. And now we can see the size and shape of each patch as well as of the beams. Now this beam patch, you can see has a couple of lines defined. And let me zoom in on the end there and query this. Now it's mirrored about center line because it's a symmetric model, but you can see the first line in is basically showing you the effective width of the plate, and it's defined in here. The plate effective width for ultimate strength is 1.1 meters, and then the overall effective plate width for buckling is 2.5 meters. And you can see both of those distances drawn graphically around the beam when it shows the patch. The other option here for under evaluation patches is this element evaluation, and we'll look at that a little later, but basically it'll bring up the patch evaluation dialog. This was what it was going to bring up. So this is basically the evaluation patch and all of the data used to run it against one of these criteria. The other options under generating the evaluation patches, there's also this create/evaluate, and again that opens up this same dialog that we just selected through here, individual panel evaluation. It's also for creating. You can just create a new patch. It's sort of a virtual patch. It doesn't exist in the model here. We can assign a length, width, and thickness, a material, and for depending on the criteria, you'll have different things available. And if we switch to user-defined here, auto will take values from the model, but since this is a new one that we just created, it doesn't have data from the model, we'd do user-defined, and we would supply our own length, width, thickness, and stresses, and so forth. And then we can do an evaluation when we hit compute.